The lie of a perfect life is a fragile thing. It's a pane of antique glass, beautiful and clear, until a single sharp impact sends a web of fractures racing across its surface. For me, that impact came in the form of a stolen kiss, witnessed through a door left carelessly ajar. I was standing in the corner of the grand ballroom Sterling construction, rented out every December for its Christmas party. The air was thick with the scent of pine, expensive perfume, and the cloying sweetness of corporate success. My name is Elias Vance, and for 10 years, I'd been the husband of Clarissa Vance, a woman I believed I knew better than the grain of the oak I worked with my own two hands. I was a master carpenter, a restorer of homes. I took what was broken and made it whole again. It was a cruel irony I wouldn't appreciate until later. Through the din of forced laughter and clinking champagne flutes, I saw her slip away from her circle of colleagues. She was followed, almost predatorily, by her boss, the man himself, Preston Sterling. He was everything I wasn't: sleek, tailored, his smile a polished veneer that never quite reached his eyes. He owned the biggest construction firm in the county, a modern empire of glass and steel. I built things to last for generations. He built things to turn a profit by next quarter. They disappeared into his private office off the main hall. The door didn't quite latch. A sliver of light cut through the gloom of my corner. Curiosity, or perhaps a primal protective instinct, drew me closer. I told myself I was being paranoid, and then I saw it. Through that perfect crack in the door, their lips met. It wasn't a gentle, fleeting kiss. It was hungry, desperate, their hands exploring each other like teenagers fumbling in the dark. The beer bottle in my hand felt suddenly cold, its weight a dangerous anchor in a world that had just been knocked off its axis. 10 years of marriage. Our 8-year-old daughter, Willow, at home with a babysitter, her drawing of our family mommy-daddy and her taped to the refrigerator. And here was Clarissa, throwing it all away in a 10-second clinch with a man who probably didn't even remember her middle name. "You all right, man? You look like you've seen a ghost." A voice boomed, and a heavy hand slapped my back. It was one of Clarissa's coworkers. I forced a smile, my jaw clenched so tight I felt a molar grind. "Just not feeling well. Think I might head out." "Already? Clarissa just told me you guys were staying till the end." Of course she did, I thought. She had plans that didn't include me going home early. "Changed my mind," I muttered, downing the rest of my beer in one long, bitter swallow. In my younger days, the man I used to be would have kicked that office door off its hinges. He would have dragged Preston Sterling out by his $500 silk tie and rearranged his perfect white teeth right there on the polished hardwood floor. My body tensed, a phantom memory of old bar fights and youthful rage surging through my veins. But I was 36 now, with a daughter I adored and a business I'd built from sawdust and sweat. Violence was a blunt instrument, and this betrayal required the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Violence would cost me everything: my freedom, my business, my daughter. And Clarissa? Well, it was becoming devastatingly clear I had already lost her. So, I walked out. I grabbed my coat, the festive jingle of a bell on the main door mocking me as I stepped into the frigid December air. The drive home was a silent, white-knuckled ordeal. The Christmas lights strung across the houses on our street seemed to mock me, their cheerful glow an insult to the darkness that had just consumed my world. When I pulled into our driveway, I paid the teenage babysitter extra and sent her home. Then I sat in our living room, in the dark, surrounded by the ghosts of a happy life. Wedding photos on the mantle, Willow's finger paintings on the wall, the worn armchair where Clarissa and I used to read. I sat there for 3 hours, a statue carved from ice and fury. When she finally came home, she was humming. Actually, humming. "Elias, why are you sitting in the dark?" She flipped on a lamp, and the soft light illuminated the evidence. Her lipstick was smudged, a faint red corona around her perfect lips. Her hair, always impeccably styled, had a few loose strands that spoke of something other than organizing files. "Had a headache," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Party end early?" "No, it was still going when I left," she said, breezy and unconcerned. "I told you not to wait up. Preston needed help organizing some files for the Henderson project. You know how important that account is." "Preston. Not Mr. Sterling anymore." A flicker of something guilt, maybe fear, crossed her face before she smoothed it over. "We've been working so closely on this project. The whole office is on a first-name basis now." The lie was so effortless, so practiced. This wasn't the first time. I could have confronted her right then, shattered our carefully constructed life with the ugly truth. But a strange, chilling calm had settled over me. It was a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I saw the path forward not as a raging inferno, but as a cold, deliberate deconstruction. "I'm going to bed," was all I said. That night, lying beside my unfaithful wife, her breathing deep and even in sleep, I didn't rest. I planned. I designed. I drew up the blueprints for a new kind of project. Not one of restoration, but of demolition. The smell of sawdust and varnish in my workshop, the detached garage I'd converted into my sanctuary, had always brought me peace. The next morning, before dawn, it fueled my focus. The rage from the night before had cooled, hardening into something more useful: resolve. "Daddy, what are you making?" Willow's small voice came from the doorway. My beautiful daughter, blonde pigtails and curious eyes. So much like her mother, it was a physical ache to look at her. "Hey, sweetheart, just working on some ideas," I smiled, putting down my pencil. I had been sketching, but not for a client. I was sketching for myself. While she happily sanded a spare piece of pine, her tongue sticking out in concentration, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to tear down Preston Sterling's world. I was going to build something of my own so magnificent that the rubble of his life would be nothing but a footnote. After Clarissa left with Willow for brunch with her parents, a brunch I dodged with a lie about an emergency job for the Hendersons, throwing her own excuse back at her, I made the calls that would lay the foundation for my new life. The first was to my old high school buddy, Gideon, who now worked in the white-collar crime division of the state attorney general's office. "Elias Vance, as I live and breathe," he said warmly. "Must be 5 years." "At least," I admitted. "Listen, I need some advice. Hypothetically speaking." Oh boy, nothing good ever follows those words. "Hypothetically," I began, my voice low, "if someone suspected major construction fraud, substituting materials, falsifying permits, that kind of thing, how would they prove it?" There was a pause. "This about Sterling Construction, by any chance?" "Elias, guys like him are notoriously slippery. They build walls of plausible deniability with paperwork. To build a case, you'd need more than rumors. You'd need a clear, indisputable paper trail, something concrete. And whatever you do," he added, his tone sharpening, "don't obtain it illegally. It has to be admissible." I understood perfectly. My second project began that night. While Clarissa was in the bath, I went into our home office. Her work laptop was on the desk. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear, but from a cold, thrilling sense of purpose. Her password was the one we'd used for everything since Willow was born: our daughter's name and birth year. A password built on a family she was now betraying. I dove into the digital records of Sterling Construction. It was worse than I imagined. It was a systemic, calculated fraud. I found duplicate invoices, one for the client showing premium, grade, A lumber, and another for the supplier showing the purchase of cheaper, grade, C wood. I found permit applications with falsified engineering data, and on dozens of safety inspections was the same signature: Alan Reeves. I photographed everything with my phone, my hands steady. This wasn't just about an affair anymore. This was about a man who built his fortune by endangering families, cutting corners on the very structures meant to protect them. And my wife, my Clarissa, was at the center of the paper trail, organizing the documents that made it all possible. The next day, I began my first project, the one of rebirth. I met with a real estate agent who showed me a property on the edge of town. It was a historic Victorian, abandoned for years, a magnificent wreck. Peeling paint, a rotting porch, buckled floors. Most people saw a money pit. I saw its soul. I saw good bones, history, character. I saw my future. "You sure about this, Elias?" the agent asked, skeptical. "This place needs everything." "That's exactly why I want it," I said, running a hand over the original crown molding covered in dust and cobwebs. By the end of the week, I had secured a loan and bought the property. When I told Clarissa, the reaction was explosive. "You did what?" she shrieked, pacing our pristine kitchen. "We can barely afford this mortgage, and you bought another house without even talking to me?" "It's an investment," I said calmly, sipping my coffee. "I'm going to restore it. It'll be the first project for my own company, Vance Restoration." "With what time?" "You're already working 60 hours a week." "I'll manage," I said, looking her directly in the eye. "Besides, I thought you'd be happy having me out of your hair more often. You seem to be working late a lot yourself these days. How is the Henderson project going?" The color drained from her face. The pretense between us was cracking, And in a way, it was a relief. The unspoken war had finally been declared. She didn't know it yet, but I had already chosen my battlefield and stockpiled my ammunition. The Victorian became my world. Every spare moment was poured into its revival. I worked with a fury that was part passion, part exorcism. While I ripped out rotted floorboards and stripped decades of paint, I was also ripping out the last vestiges of the man I had been, the trusting husband, the man who believed in happily ever afters. I was working 16-hour days, often sleeping on a cot in the dusty half-finished living room, too exhausted and too unwilling to go back to the cold silence of my marital bed. Vance Restoration was being built one restored joist, one reglazed window at a time. Simultaneously, I built my case. I found Alan Reeves, the safety inspector. He was an older man, weary and burdened by years of compromise. I met him in a quiet diner, laying out copies of the inspections he'd signed off on. He tried to bluster, but his resolve crumbled quickly. It started small, he confessed, staring into his coffee cup, overlooking minor issues. Then Sterling, he just kept pushing. Bigger risks, deeper cuts. He's got a piece of everyone, holds it over their heads. And my wife, Clarissa Vance? What's her role? I asked, my voice level, betraying none of the turmoil inside me. Reeves looked up, his eyes filled with a weary pity. She handles the documentation, the submissions. She knows, man. Maybe not the whole scope, but she knows the paperwork is cooked. Sterling doesn't keep people around who don't play ball. The confirmation hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd already known it in my gut. She wasn't just a victim of a charming boss. She was a willing accomplice. As word of my restoration project spread, so did the whispers about my split from Sterling's sphere of influence. One morning, I arrived at the Victorian to find the front door kicked in. The interior was a scene of calculated destruction. Fresh drywall was smashed with a hammer. The delicate trim I'd spent a week restoring was ripped from the walls. The new, custom-milled windows were shattered. Standing in the wreckage, I didn't feel despair. I felt a cold, clarifying rage. This was a clumsy, brutish message from Preston Sterling, and it was the biggest mistake he could have made. I called the police, filed a report, and then I called Gideon. They're getting nervous, I told him. Document everything, he advised, and watch your back. But Preston hadn't counted on the culture of our small town. He had bullied and underpaid his subcontractors for years. He thought fear was loyalty. He was wrong. News of the vandalism spread like wildfire. The next day, 2 electricians who'd been stiffed by Sterling on a previous job showed up at my site. Heard you had some trouble, one said gruffly. We'll rewire this whole place for you. Cost of materials only. By the end of the week, a plumber, a roofer, and a team of painters had all made similar offers. They were tired of being pushed around by Sterling. My personal vendetta had become a quiet rebellion. His attempt to intimidate me had backfired spectacularly, turning me into a symbol of defiance. We rebuilt the damage in half the time, the house now fortified not just with wood and nails, but with the solidarity of honest craftsmen. The Victorian was transforming. What was once a skeletal ruin was now breathing again. The exterior boasted a fresh coat of historically accurate paint. The porch was solid underfoot, and light poured through newly installed windows. One evening, as I was measuring for custom moldings, headlights swept across the windows. A familiar car pulled into the driveway. It was Clarissa. She walked through the front door, her heels clicking on the newly finished hardwood floors, her eyes wide with a wonder that felt entirely disingenuous. So, this is where you've been disappearing to, she said, running a manicured hand along a restored banister. It's beautiful, Elias. What are you doing here, Clarissa? I asked, my voice flat. She turned to face me, her expression shifting to one of strained seriousness. Preston proposed to me today. The words were a punch to the gut, but I kept my face a mask of neutrality. Congratulations. I haven't given him an answer yet, she said quickly. Why not? Isn't this what you've been working toward? Her eyes flashed with anger. It wasn't like that. And what about you? Buying this house without telling me? Starting a business behind my back? I had to laugh, a short, bitter sound. I'm not sleeping with this house, Clarissa. I'm investing in my future. A future I'm increasingly certain doesn't include you. She moved closer. The expensive perfume Preston probably bought her filling the air between us. We could start over. I could tell him no. We could try again, for Willow's sake. For a fleeting moment, I wavered. The memory of happier times, the thought of our daughter. But then I remembered her humming at the door, The ease of her lies, the knowledge of her complicity. No, I said firmly. I'm not interested in being your backup plan. Not anymore. Her expression hardened. You'll regret this. When I'm Mrs. Preston Sterling, living in a mansion, you'll still be here with sawdust under your fingernails. Better honest sawdust than dishonest luxury, I replied. By the way, does Preston know about the state investigation yet? Her face went pale. What investigation? The one into Sterling Construction's fraudulent practices, the substituted materials, the falsified permits. It's all coming to light, Clarissa. Soon. She fled without another word. The confrontation I had dreaded was over, and I was still standing. The second confrontation happened 2 days later. I was having lunch at a local diner when the door swung open and Preston Sterling walked in. The busy restaurant fell silent as he spotted me and made a beeline for my table. He pulled up a chair uninvited. Up close, he looked frayed. Dark circles under his eyes, his suit rumpled. Whatever game you're playing, Vance, it stops now, he hissed, leaning in close. I have friends in places you can't even imagine. I kept my voice calm, aware that every eye was on us. Is that why you sent your thugs to trash my property? Because of all your important friends? I don't know what you're talking about, he scoffed, his eyes darting away. Sure you do, I leaned forward. Just like you know your empire of lies is crumbling. How does it feel, Preston, watching everything you built on shortcuts and deceit fall apart? His face flushed with rage. For a moment I thought he might get physical, but the awareness of his audience finally seemed to penetrate his anger. He shoved his chair back abruptly. This isn't over, he snarled. You're right about that, I agreed, my voice carrying across the silent diner. It's just beginning. As he stormed out, I felt 10 feet tall. Bullies only have power when you're afraid of them, and I wasn't afraid of Preston Sterling anymore. Chapter 5. The Collapse. The fall of the House of Sterling happened faster than anyone expected. 3 weeks later, the story broke. An anonymous tip not from me. As it turned out, Preston had made plenty of enemies led state investigators to re-inspect a recently completed housing development. The substitution of substandard materials was just the tip of the iceberg. The local paper ran the story on the front page. Sterling Construction faces state fraud investigation. I watched Clarissa's face as she read it over breakfast, her hands trembling. This is a witch hunt, she whispered. Preston would never. Save it, Clarissa. I cut her off, my patience gone. We both know exactly what kind of man he is. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear. Not of losing me, but of losing herself. What do you mean? I mean, I saw you at the Christmas party. I know everything. She dropped the newspaper as if it had burned her. The carefully constructed walls of her denial crumbled to dust. Preston was arrested a week later, charged with fraud, tax evasion, and racketeering. His assets were frozen. Construction on all his projects ground to a halt. His empire, built on a foundation of lies, had collapsed. Clarissa was brought in for questioning. She called me that night, her voice a frantic, sobbing mess. They think I was part of it, Elias. Preston, he's blaming everything on me. He's saying I was the one who kept the records, that I should have known. She paused, then whispered, You have to help me. Tell them I'm a good person, that I was just following orders. Were you? I asked quietly. There was a long silence, filled only by her ragged breathing. Your choices have consequences, Clarissa, I said, my voice not unkind but firm. I chose to rebuild. You chose to keep lying. I hung up the phone. While Sterling Construction was being dismantled by lawyers and federal agents, Vance Restoration was taking flight. The story of my little company standing up to the town bully, coupled with the impeccable quality of the Victorian restoration, had become something of a local legend. One afternoon, a luxury sedan pulled up to the Victorian, which was now complete and on the market. A well-dressed man in his 60s stepped out. His name was Howard Garrison, a prominent developer with a reputation for high-end, quality projects. Mr. Vance, he said, shaking my hand firmly, I've been hearing a lot about you. I've been looking for the right contractor for a new development, someone who values quality over cutting corners. He looked me directly in the eye. Someone who isn't Preston Sterling. My heart raced. This was it. The kind of opportunity that could establish my company for decades. I'd be very interested in discussing that project. Mr. Garrison, I said, my voice steady. That night, I stood alone in the finished Victorian. Light from a chandelier I'd restored gleamed on the polished floors. The house was solid, beautiful, and honest. It was everything I wanted my life to be. Chapter 6. Restoration complete. Nearly 2 years can change everything. Standing on the porch of a fully restored 1,922nd Craftsman bungalow, my latest project, I felt like a different man. The autumn air was crisp, and the scent of wood smoke hung in the air. Vance Restoration was no longer a one-man operation. I had a team of 8 full-time employees, and the contract with Howard Garrison had turned into a multi-year partnership that was reshaping the high-end housing market in our region. I was no longer just Elias the carpenter. I was Elias Vance, a restoration specialist known for integrity and craftsmanship. Inside, Serafina was arranging flowers on the massive kitchen island. I had met her, an interior designer, on the Garrison project. Our professional respect had slowly blossomed into something more, something quiet and true. We were building something solid, one day at a time. Preston Sterling was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. His fortune was seized to pay off debts and fund a county-wide audit of his past projects. In a move of poetic justice, Vance Restoration was one of the firms hired to perform the inspections and make the necessary repairs. Clarissa, in exchange for her full testimony against Preston, received 3 years of probation. Her fall from grace was public and humbling. For Willow's sake, we maintained a civil co-parenting relationship, a fragile peace built on scheduled drop-offs and polite, brief conversations. The trust between us was gone forever. The doorbell rang. I opened it to find Clarissa standing there. "I need to talk to you," she said, then stopped as she saw Serafina through the archway into the kitchen. "Oh, I didn't realize you had company." "Sarah." "This is Clarissa," I said, my voice level. "Clarissa, this is Serafina, my girlfriend." Clarissa's smile was brittle. Her eyes swept around the beautiful, light-filled space, a home built with the kind of care and honesty she had traded away. Whatever she had come to say died on her lips. She mumbled something about Willow's school schedule and left. As she drove away, Serafina came and wrapped her arms around my waist from behind, resting her head on my back. "Everything okay?" I turned to face her, pulling her close. "Definitely," I said, and for the first time in a long time, it was the absolute truth. Later that evening, I stood on the porch, watching the sun set. I thought about the journey of the past 2 years. The revenge wasn't a destructive act, but one of creation. The profound revenge of refusing to be destroyed and building something better, stronger, and more honest from the wreckage. Living well isn't just the best revenge, it's the ultimate restoration.